Live from London, it's Anchor of the Week with your host and show creator, Mike Graham.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. And what a week it has been. Goodness gracious me. I mean, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do this show in anything less than about 2.5 hours, but we're going to try and do it in an hour and a bit. I'm Mike Graham, of course, and this is the one place to be for the common sense view of the world. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by a couple of now Plank regulars. I mean, it's actually an insult to Russell Quirk to call him a regular. I mean, he was on the first ever Plank of the Week. Did we work out 6 years ago?
6 years ago, last month.
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary. Mark Littlewood, of course, extraordinary economist. That's 2 E's. He's been with us for a few of these now. And we've got a newbie. We've got Rebecca Butler, the sensational barrister who knows everything there is to know about the law and some other things as well that we won't talk about. She's joining us from down the line in France, believe it or not, where I don't know whether there's a French pronunciation for the word plank. Le plank, I suppose you could say.
Has it got a QUE on the end?
There we go. Well, we do plonk of the week as well. In fact, I've got myself a glass of Trump champagne, which I'm not allowed to call champagne apparently, but it's Blanc de Noir. It's very nice. I feel as though because we should have a policy of ladies first, Rebecca. We should give you the honour of kicking us off, and you would like to nominate Andrew, the arsehole formerly known as Prince, and his former wife, Fergie.
Yes, I would. I remain very firm in my view that just because you are born into the royal family, it neither bestows brains or, in fact, any money. And so the royals happily trade their public-funded titles and their access into places like Buckingham Palace in return for freebies, and that's all they seem to be after. Looking at the emails between Sarah, the former Duchess of York, and Jeffrey Epstein are just so cringingly awful, not least because these people have all been beneficiaries of extremely expensive educations, and none of them can sensibly string a sentence together. But her gushing adoration of Jeffrey Epstein, knowing that he had a conviction for child prostitution, is just utterly disgusting.
It really is utterly disgusting. And what about
Tagging weekend was just so awful to say that to anybody, never mind a convicted paedophile.
Yeah. Exactly. And the wording as well from her assistant of the begging letter that they sent, or the begging email, the Duchess would be very happy to join you, but she needs a business class flight, which will cost about, I think they said 9,000 quid or something. But don't worry, the two daughters will happily come for an economy ticket, and which will be at about another 4. So I think, about 13 or 14,000 pounds. And then the sign off was, will this be okay to book? I mean, it's frankly just awful, isn't it?
I mean, what was Epstein actually getting out of Sarah Ferguson? That's what I don't understand, because Sarah Ferguson didn't give him access to Andrew. That was Ghislaine Maxwell. So I cannot imagine that Jeffrey Epstein, who is more intelligent than Fergie and Andrew combined, what on earth was he getting from that relationship other than a pain in the backside who was just constantly fawning over him and demanding freebies? It's just utterly disgusting.
But maybe she gave him access to some other people, perhaps that Andrew didn't know, or people that were in her circle of friends, or maybe she just supplied him with a sort of never-ending list of sexual partners or potential sexual partners, because, of course, as you referred to a bit earlier, that note that she sent where she was like, oh, I've got this friend of mine, she's single, she's got a great body, and you should marry her, but if you don't want to marry her, why don't you just marry me and we could hire her to work for us? I mean, amazing.
She's a madam. Pimping her friends out. That's how I read that in that context. She was offering to supply somebody to Jeffrey Epstein, and ha ha, joke. the other thing I just will not tolerate is this notion that, oh, I didn't realize how bad he was,
Right.
and I didn't realize the depth of his depravity. Well, you did, because he was convicted
Oh,
of a
yeah,
paedophile offence. Like, what more do you need
yeah.
than the fact of a conviction? Well, why do you need more detail? And when in the history of ever being a criminal, has a criminal ever told the truth? That's the whole point about being a criminal, is they don't tell the truth.
Right. Well, it's like
So
they say in the Shawshank Redemption, you know, everyone's in here is innocent, man. You know, nobody's done anything. They've just somehow been screwed up by their lawyer. Rebecca kicks us off well there with Andrew. It's tempting to think that this scandal is only about Peter Mandelson, which is massive, and we'll obviously get onto that. But I mean, Russell, today, The Sun has got shamed Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is facing a revolt from staff at his new Sandringham home who refused to serve him.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's cringeable, isn't it? And look, we know that Fergie and indeed Andrew, I mean, they're kind of definitely made for each other,
Yeah.
in that they've both always been grifters, haven't they? I mean, it's not that long ago.
No.
What was that expose, that guy she was going out with that used to like sucking her toes? Do you
Oh,
remember
yeah,
that?
Johnny Bryant.
Johnny Bryant, yeah. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about Rebecca Ferguson, doesn't it? So, but it is the establishment. Rebecca Ferguson, sorry.
Yeah.
Sarah Ferguson. It is the establishment, isn't
Yeah.
it? And the establishment that, you know, put their morals and their integrity to one side in exchange for a glimpse and a shot at power and money
Yeah.
and so on. They literally prostitute their principles.
Yeah.
And look,
If they have any.
if they have any in the first place. But look, there's a whole load more to come out of this, I think, in terms of other dignitaries, politicians, celebrities, and so on, that have effectively not just cozied up to Epstein, knowing what he was all about,
Yeah.
but maybe, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, really, maybe unintentionally, maybe been a bit complicit in kind of furnishing him, if you like, with, without putting too fine a point on it, the ammunition. It's a bit like a Taken film, isn't it? Liam Neeson, you know, where those fat, horrible oligarchs are sitting there bidding on all the women. I mean, it just kind of reminds me of that, where all of these people, the people that are on the edge of this Epstein fracas, this scandal, are kind of all part of that cabal of sleazy, it's just disgraceful and disgusting, isn't it? And people, we keep saying it, the media keeps saying it, why isn't anybody in jail? Apart from Epstein going and Ghislaine Maxwell, there should be, by my reckoning, dozens and dozens of people in jail for enabling this whole scenario, surely.
That's right. I mean, one of the things that's horrified me about it, look, there's enough to be truly shocked about. But the thing that's grated with me, perhaps I should say, Mike, rather than horrified me, none of these people can spell. I mean, have you seen these emails?
Rebecca alluded to that.
Yeah, I mean,
They've all gone to private school.
Yeah, but they don't use capital letters even, especially Epstein. I mean, it's not even just like the odd missing apostrophe. It's absolutely
That is
appalling
actually
throughout.
one of the things that really is so irritating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think they should be in prison for their lack of grammar?
Well, I mean, I can be a bit right-wing on crime and punishment. I'm not sure I go that far, right? But, I mean, it kind of, I think, when you're actually reading through it, it just kind of underscores the idiocy of it all, doesn't it?
It does.
That you'd expect if you're framing a note about looking forward to seeing you, or can you give me some help with this, or that it would be framed in an elegant fashion.
But don't you
and
think
it's
it's
not.
also-
This is like teenage brats talking to each other.
But it's also the arrogance of the establishment, isn't it? That they've put this stuff in writing, whether it be text messages, emails, or whatever, thinking, well, no one's ever going to see this. I'm never going to be. There's never going to be a mea culpa necessary. You know, that it was never going to come on top. How wrong were they?
Well, this is the thing, and I mean, Rebecca, back to you. I don't know whether this is a more modern phenomena, but you know, we're all told, don't write something down in a WhatsApp message if you don't want it to come back to haunt you. You know, don't send somebody an email threatening them. You know, if you're going to do it, make sure you do it in person. You know, all of these kind of, you know, caveats which now exist apparently didn't exist back then, or they were completely oblivious to whether anybody saw it or not.
Yeah, so they're arrogant and stupid. So that's the first thing. So they wouldn't think, because they are so entitled, they wouldn't think that this could come back to haunt them. They think they are sort of immunized from
Bulletproof.
everything. But I think the other point is that, of course, there's a potential for compromat here. There is a potential that Jeffrey Epstein was basically a puppet master. So he had his very, very distorted view of sort of sex and what enjoyment was, and, you know, preferring younger girls. So the paedophile side of him is one thing. The other side is the compromat side. Now, Fergie and Andrew, total useful idiots to him, total useful idiots. Peter Mandelson, slightly different emphasis on it. But something that Russell just said that really does need addressing: why aren't any men in prison?
Yes.
It's because between them, Jeffrey Epstein and Alan Dershowitz provided immunity from prosecution for about a dozen to 20 of the people involved on the sexual side of Jeffrey Epstein. So every single one of those girls who's received money either from Epstein himself or from the Epstein estate is under a non-disclosure agreement.
Right.
Even Virginia Giuffre couldn't put it in her book because she would have been in breach of her NDA. Now, we have had discussions in this country about NDAs before, and this is a really important point, that where sexual misconduct is concerned, women are forced to sign up to NDAs to immunize their abuser or whoever it is. In this case, the Florida authorities were perfectly happy on the plea deal to take an agreement that they would never prosecute that list of people. Interestingly, Ghislaine Maxwell was not in that list of people, but there were 20 people who were immune from future prosecution. You will never know who they are.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And because this week as well, of course, we learned that the Clintons, Bill and Hillary, are going to be appearing before the Congressional Committee, which they previously said they weren't going to do. They now are going to do it. And I wonder if that's going to change perhaps who else gets targeted and who else gets asked to appear. But is there not a legal sort of responsibility, if you like, for the law to protect women who have been forced to sign an NDA which says they can't then talk about it? Surely if they've been abused, there must be a law which says you can override the NDA.
Quite. And, an NDA is usually drafted, certainly in the UK, is drafted in civil proceedings. So it'll be in an employment matter or a contractual issue where they're told, right, leave the company, here's your money, but shut up. Now, when it crosses over into a criminal allegation, then there is precedent for that NDA to be waived and put aside where there is criminal activity. It's very different in the US, and you and your panel members, Mark and Russell, will remember Michael Jackson having the same issue, that he signed NDAs with his victims, and they received a payout in return for their silence. So it is something that happens in America, because you can enter plea deals in America, and your plea deal actually goes to how long and the nature of your sentence. Epstein was extremely well represented by Alan Dershowitz, arguably the finest defense attorney in the States. He did a great job for his client, something that Jeffrey Epstein was not happy with. And Jeffrey Epstein and Alan Dershowitz fell out because Epstein couldn't actually believe that he did have a custodial sentence, albeit only a part-time custodial sentence where he was allowed out all day. He only slept in custody. So he fell out with Alan Dershowitz over that. But part of that whole plea deal was immunity for the 20 or so men who were also implicated in the computer hard drives that were left behind, the images, the documents that Jeffrey Epstein left behind at his Florida apartment, his house, rather, his villa in Palm Springs. So there is a whole tranche of stuff that Jeffrey Epstein took away with him, because when the state police went in, they found that the computer hard drives had been stripped out. So a lot of the prejudicial data and evidence we will probably never see because it's been destroyed.
Right, we'll never know. Rebecca, we're going to move on. Thank you very much indeed. Rebecca there talking about the hard drives, the people who've been protected by the NDAs and all the rest of it. We'll come back, of course, to Mandelson. We'll come back to Keir Starmer in a moment. But Russell, let me throw it over to you. A story which is completely different. Nothing to do with the Epstein scandal, and it's to do with the Metrolink bus company.
Yeah, buses. So this is the story. Actually goes back to summer 2024 when the incident actually happened, but it's come to light now because of a certain employment tribunal that has ensued. And here's the background. This is a plucky bus driver, shall we say, Mark Hahir.
There's a word you don't hear often.
Plucky.
Great word.
Yeah, Mark Hahir, who is driving his bus between Wembley and Maida Vale. And as he stops at a bus stop, a woman goes to get off, and there's a guy behind her that, as the bus stops and the doors open, the guy behind her grabs her necklace, rips it off her neck, and runs off. Now, most people would shrug their shoulders in today's London, frankly, and go, oh, well, that's crime number 573 today. Never mind, we'll all move on. Well done, Sadiq Khan, for ruining our city. What Mark Hahir decided to do was to open the door of his cab, get out of the bus and run after the scrote, the assailant, whatever, tackles him to the ground, lands a bit of a punch on the side of his head, which is quite an important factor in this story, retrieves the necklace, gives it back. Now, in my world, I would have then awarded that particular gentleman, Mark Hahir, Employee of the Week, probably given him a little bonus and given him a parking space outside the bus depot for the rest of his life, right, to reward his valiant efforts. What Metroline instead decided to do was to fire him. Yeah. So they fire him on the basis that he overreached. He apparently, their words, broke policy insofar as the policy that they have, which is
to allow people to steal necklaces.
Well, not to endanger, ironically, Mark, not to endanger other people on the bus, because he left them. But he left the bus, indicators on, handbrake on, and so on. No one was in any danger.
Like buses never stop for no reason for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, like every 3 seconds.
And one of the most annoying things that because bizarrely, you might not know this, I take quite a lot of buses, and you get...
You take buses?
I do, yeah, because actually I
can't picture that.
I know. Well, where I live, right, I take a bus to the tube, and if I'm coming into town, because if I'm going out for lunch, or I'm not going to bring the car. I also don't particularly want to pay the congestion charge if I don't need to. I don't really want to have to pay 35 quid to park for 4 hours, But you'll get you'll get on the bus and you'll get one stop and it will go, the driver has been asked to wait to smooth out the timetable running of the bus network. And you just sit there, right? So whether or not the guy's in the cab or not doesn't really matter.
Wow. So there you go, everybody. Mike Graham is a bus wanker. Can I say that? You might have to bleep it. Who knew? Yeah. Anyways, but it gets worse. So Mark here thinks, hang on, I'm not having this. I've tried to do the right thing, as people should. And so he takes them to a tribunal, and the tribunal have upheld the case for Metroline and said, as per their policy,
is it Metroline or Metrolink?
Metrolink, one of the two. Yeah. So the tribunal has decided that he did act in an over-the-top way. I think
is that probably because of the punch, right? Is that the punch?
Yeah, maybe. But don't we think though that all's fair in love and war kind of thing, right? And if he's generally done the right thing, he's brought the guy to task. But here's the thing as well: in this fracas that ensued, the police come along and arrest both of the individuals. So Mark here and the assailant. And I guess that's fair enough because the police turn up; they don't really know what's going on. But he was in custody for ages. And the police turn their attention to him almost as being the worst of the two individuals in this whole scenario. I think it's absolutely appalling.
Why didn't the cops just go to the passengers who presumably would have been able
the
to
CCTV
give
on buses as well?
Yeah, quite. You would have thought you could quite quickly get an accurate account of events.
But the wider point, I think, to me, is that society and corporations have got to this point. They're so scared of their own shadows, sort of backing common sense. They're all worried about reputational damage. They're all worried about, look, Rebecca might want to comment on this, being sued. No doubt, actually, the assailant that was tackled to the ground and punched, I bet he's probably considering legal action against the person that stopped him stealing somebody's necklace right now. So, frankly, he'll be plank of the week in the next few weeks if he does. No, I think it's absolutely appalling. And I think that Mark should be applauded. And in fact, apparently, there is a GoFundMe that someone set up for him that's already raised about 40 grand because he's lost his job over this.
Yeah, right. And he's also said, I think, that he doesn't want the job back. Rebecca, in your with your barrister's hat on, are companies now scared, witless, for want of a better word, of, do-it-yourself kind of...
have-a-go heroes.
Vigilantes, have-a-go heroes. Are they worried that if one of their employees does something that they're going to be sued?
Yes, they are, but Russell's absolutely quite right. But the issue is that you've got to get this past a judge, So being scared witless of maybe a criminal prosecution of your bus driver, the problem there is that if you put that case in front of a jury would acquit them. A jury would absolutely have none of it and would say, don't be utterly ridiculous. In the criminal law, self-defense or defense of another, which is what he was doing, doesn't matter how much force you use, if you can justify the use of force. So it's not an eye for an eye. You can have a gun and somebody punch you and you're still entitled to a defense of self-defense. But in the corporate world, the corporate side, yes, they run scared of everything. And of course, you know, what Russell hasn't mentioned is that HR managers run companies,
Yes.
and HR managers are the biggest halt to growth and the biggest halt to common sense, mostly in big companies.
Yeah.
So it's the HR department that's the problem, not the threat of being sued, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you're right. The HR department probably the villain of the piece here. And funnily enough, I had a boss once who used to call the HR department of the company the business interruption department,
Yeah, quite
because
right.
they basically stopped anybody from doing anything sensible.
Yeah.
Mark, we're going to come to you in a minute, but I'm going to just do my first one because I've got a few to get through here. And my first nomination is The Sun. Newspaper, not because of what they've done today or what they did yesterday, but because at the beginning of this week, after all of those pictures came out of Mandelson in his underwear, of Andrew leering and sort of, you know, leaning over that woman on all fours, she's lying on the ground, they decided that the most important story of the day, on not just Monday, but also Tuesday, was the idea that Lewis Hamilton, the racing driver, was going out with Kim Kardashian.
Right.
Yeah.
And I sort of couldn't quite believe my eyes, because I'm thinking, have I lost the plot here?
It's almost as
You know?
pointless as all the headlines around the Beckhams falling out with each other.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
well, I mean, the thing about newspapers, and I worked in them for many years, is that, you know, you make a decision on the day. You know, sometimes, I remember, and this will amuse you, I used to be night editor of the Daily Express, which meant that I was the guy that sat on the backbench, the sort of production unit, and decided where all the stories went, right? So you'd decide pretty much what was the page lead on 3, 5, 7, 9. You'd somehow delegate bits of it, but also what was on the front page. And I was off the day that Gianni Versace got assassinated outside his house in Miami. And I rang up, because that's the sort of sad git that I am, to speak to the guy who was my deputy.
It's quite a big story.
And I said, this is amazing. I said, I'm so sorry I'm not there. I said, you must love it. And he went, yeah. He said, the editor doesn't want to splash it. I said, what? What do you mean? He said, he doesn't want to splash it. I said, well, why not? He said, that's what everybody else will be doing. And I'm like,
Well, yeah, because it's big news.
It's news of the day.
What did they splash with instead?
I think I managed to convince them. I rang the editor up and I'm like, have you gone effing mad? You know, are you seriously going to put out a national newspaper without putting the main story on Gianni Versace, one of the top, most well-known
But Mike, you know what? In a similar vein, you know, the Daily Mirror did exactly that this morning. So
Actually, they did, yeah.
With
This
all
is
of this that's happening, Mark
Yeah.
and I were talking about this last night, with all the stuff that's happening about Starmer, which I know we'll come on to,
Yeah.
we're sitting there watching all the front pages coming in, and relentlessly, it's
Yeah.
Starmer's finished, Starmer's out. Even The Guardian.
In The
he's
Guardian
done.
said
Yeah.
he's on his
It's
last
closed,
leg.
Do you
yeah.
think, okay, that's it then. Daily Mirror comes out, one of the last front pages, and the front of it is lamenting the demise of John Virgo.
John Virgo.
I mean, look, sad story.
Sad story.
I'm not sure that trumps Keir Starmer's demise.
No.
Well, they also had in the top corner, in fairness, it did feature on the front page, but in this sort of 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch
Yeah.
box, right next to a coupon for a free bottle of Coke, which I think was even a bit bigger. So I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in the Mirror
But that
editorial
wasn't,
room.
Mark, that wasn't
Yeah.
even Starmer's finished. It was
It was
Mandelson
Manny had
lied
lied
PM.
to Starmer,
Yeah,
Starmer
no
how
kidding.
very daring.
But this
Yeah.
is the great thing about newspapers, and you know, people say, oh, but they, you know, you must have newspapers because they are the great bastion of free speech. They're really not, and in fact, the Mirror is probably the worst example of this, because whenever there's a big story, which there have been many of in the last sort of year and a half, involving Labour with the wheels coming off,
They bury it.
something terrible, they
bury
just
Or
ignore
it's
it.
on page 9.
Yeah, or they get, you know, we've got an interview with Rachel Reeves saying, how I'm going to rebuild the economy.
Yeah.
And you go, nobody believes that.
Well, I don't know who's worse.
That's a load of old
the,
cobblers.
the Daily Mirror or Beth Rigby, who, whenever she interviews
Yeah,
Keir
yeah.
Starmer or
Yeah.
Keir Starmer or Angela
What
Rayner.
are your pearls of wisdom for the nation?
They're wonderful
Prime Minister?
people. You know, misunderstood. Lovely individuals.
But isn't you were on the Sun, Mike, on your nominee? Isn't the problem they haven't decided whether they are a newspaper covering like politics and current affairs, or whether they're a kind of celebrity paper like the Star
Well, that's
or like
the
the
problem.
Sport or
News
a
of the
daily
World,
version
yeah.
of Hello Magazine? They can't decide which they are. It seems to me.
And the thing is, in the old days, you know, when Kelvin Mackenzie, who's now a regular guest on this show, was the editor, and they sold 4.5 million copies a day. They were both. Because you could be both.
Yeah.
You could stick it up your punter on the front page. You could say up yours, Delors. And that was politics.
But they did, of course.
Because they did it so brilliantly.
But let's also recognise that back in May, June 2024, in the run-up to the general election, they backed Labour, which I think was quite the surprise.
Yeah.
Now, I know, obviously, that the Conservative government was
Quite the mistake,
disintegrating
I would
before
say.
our very eyes. But they got that very wrong, didn't they?
They did, and a lot of people actually still haven't forgiven them. Because when I was working at Talk, and some people would come on all the time, and they would start having a go at Starmer, and people would go, "Hang on a minute, you said we should vote for him. You told us to vote for him.
Everything's going to be
time
great.
for a change, wasn't it? Because it was a sort of
We've certainly seen change.
we certainly have
for the
seen
worse.
change. But just in case you're in any need of an update, I just wanted to bring you this headline from a couple of hours ago in the Daily Mail. Kim Kardashian stuns in black leather look as romance with Lewis Hamilton heats up.
Wow.
Warms the cockles.
And if you missed it in the Daily Star, Kim Kardashian's playful nickname for Lewis Hamilton after alleged mean streak claims.
Yeah.
I mean,
Lewis-
do people actually read this crap?
Well, Lewis is following in, how can I tread carefully here, some rather big footsteps, I suspect, where Kim Kardashian...
Now, Rebecca, I'm sorry that this
descended.
seems to have already descended into some kind of, the sexual innuendo fest. But I mean, isn't it extraordinary how newspaper editors still think that people... I mean, I can't believe that anybody gives a toss about Kim Kardashian and Lewis Hamilton. Can they?
Regrettably, I think there are people who do, people who wouldn't know who Epstein, Mandelson, they wouldn't know who they are. They just have a prurient desire for a bit of celeb nonsense. So, yeah, I'm afraid that unfortunately there is a sector of society, and I think the Mirror and the Sun do cater to them. They haven't got a clue who you're talking about. They really don't.
I know, absolutely shocking. Right, let's give Mr. Littlewood a chance to give us your first nomination, Shahid Butt.
Yeah, Shahid Butt.
If only it was around the other way. But Shahid, why are you such a...
So this is quite
sentence.
This is quite extraordinary for viewers who aren't aware. This man has burst onto the political scene in the last couple of days, Mike.
Exploded, you might say.
Exploded onto the scene would be a very good way of putting it.
Yes, he'd like to.
He's decided to. He is going to be running as an independent candidate in Birmingham in the local council elections, and he's decided to.
Anti-Semitic.
Yes, exactly. And he's decided to introduce himself to his local electorate and indeed the wider world by doing a television interview in which it's explained that he's done a 5-year stretch as a convicted terrorist in Yemen. That's his opening pitch to the electorate. He says he was radicalised at the time, but he no longer is. It's also worth saying in this interview, when he was asked, do you consider Hamas a terrorist? He said, no, they're not terrorists. And at the end of the interview, an aide had to correct him.
Right.
And he said, when I said, no, they're not terrorists, I actually slightly misspoke. I got the numbers a bit wrong, but it turns out actually the official line is, yes, they are terrorists.
Was the aide brandishing an AK-47? As you do now when you walk around Birmingham.
It's a necessity.
Now, Russell will know more about this than me, as he's a seasoned local campaigner. But you tend to get a certain degree of support just because of your party label, right? So some people will just vote for the Conservative ticket or the independent anti-Semitic ticket or the Labour ticket or the Reform ticket or whatever. But you also have to do quite a lot of hard graft grassroots work. So you'll be knocking on somebody's door and you'll be saying, hello, Mr. Miggins, I'm your local candidate.
If you don't vote for me, I'll blow your house down.
It's quite effective.
But generally speaking,
Palestine.
I'm guessing more in Russell's sort of approach. You were a bit worried about, I don't know, the council hasn't cut the verges as much as they should, or the refuse collection isn't up so much. I'm imagining it, Mr. Butt. It's also saying, are there any municipal buildings you'd like me to blow up if I'm successfully elected? Are there any community gatherings you'd like me to target with a machete?
Right.
Yeah.
So
any geopolitical disquiet on your part that I can get involved in,
Not noting this down on the checkboard.
Any Houthi rebels that you want me to cut liaise
So
with?
there you go. I mean, if you thought there wasn't enough radicalism in politics, welcome to Mr.
Well,
Butt.
I'm just
What a
surprised.
prank.
I'm just surprised that he's standing as an independent, because of course what we now know is that he would have passed the Labour vetting process.
Well, either that or he could be a Green candidate.
Yes,
because they've got
quite
loads of them, haven't they?
Yeah,
Or
one of the
US
deputy leaders.
I've done
Next
this.
US US ambassador.
Who was that guy who won, I think, a council seat? I don't think it was an MP seat, but he won a council seat up in Yorkshire somewhere. And he said, I've done this for Gaza.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you go, you're in Bradford, mate.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I know that things
Off
are
you
bad.
go. Off you
but
trot.
We'll just off you trot. Rebecca, I mean, in France, I know that you have a similar problem with the radicalised Islamist types. But have you got a problem with local councillors or local sort of MP type representatives in the same way?
Yeah, there are certainly around the northern banlieue of Paris. Yes, there are similar problems. But can I just say, if I was put in charge with obviously you as my deputy, I would get rid of every single local politician, every single town council, every single parish council, and every single county council. I would completely depoliticize the role, have a Singapore system. These people are, they get paid like 12 grand a year
Right.
to sit once a month in a town council or a city council, plenary session. They're a complete waste of time. Local town councillors, it's bin collections. County council is education, roads and social services. Leave it all to the civil servants to run. The politicians are useless. I would save all that money, millions and millions and millions, on elections, on time wasting, on ridiculous, childish sixth form politics. Get rid of the whole lot.
Yeah.
I hate them.
I know.
Local politics is awful.
Well, don't worry. In Britain, we have got rid of it because Keir Starmer's basically outlawed elections for 4.5 million people. So you won't have an opportunity to vote about bin. Oh, by the way, Pooch has just handed me the plank because, of course, as per usual, we always get something wrong on this show. We forgot to put the... right. Let's go that way. Yeah, plank of the week. There it is. It needs to be closer, doesn't it, to me? Sorry. There we go. Plank. There we are. Thank you very much indeed. Shahid Butt. So, but the trouble is, right, because of where he is and because of what we know about the Birmingham, West Midlands situation, notwithstanding, the fact that Jess Phillips is all very keen to protect women and girls, notwithstanding the Aston Villa situation, the West Midlands police banning Israeli fans from coming to watch a football match. He'll probably get in, won't he?
Well, my hope, there's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, in British politics about tactical voting.
Ah.
Might there be, certain areas where lefties gang up to try and keep reform out, or righties gang up in order to try and beat the Green candidate. I'm sort of hoping in this ward that you might have enough people who gang up to keep the terrorist out, right? if you can show you're in a good second place, right?
To split the terrorist vote. That's a good idea. Yeah.
I mean, of course...
this bar chart's going out saying only we can beat the terrorist here, switch to vote for this party.
The Hamas guy or the Houthi guy, we just don't know. Yeah.
I mean, he says, of course, and I'm sure there'll be people that believe him, even though it's complete and utter bollocks, is that he was fitted up by the Yemenis.
Like every person in prison.
Yeah, like every person in prison, and because he didn't actually do it. They just made out that he was a terrorist.
But his immediate reaction was to say Hamas are not terrorists, right? That's his spot price, that's his takeaway for the week.
But that's not the only thing that he's famous for, of course. There's a load of clips on social media about him, saying that, if you get confronted by someone you don't like, knock their teeth out.
Right.
We should rise up.
He's not going to make it as a Metrolink driver, is he?
Well, maybe you will,
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Right, I'm going to just pop in with one more quick one. And it's on a similar vein. Not that I'm suggesting for a minute that Pep Guardiola is a terrorist. Obviously, that would be wrong. However, Pep Guardiola has been in sort of under fire this week because he disappeared off to Barcelona. No surprise there because that's where he's from. He used to be, of course, the manager of Barcelona. He's now the manager of Manchester City. They've had a pretty bad season this season. They're not doing terribly well. He's being accused of not taking enough interest in the football matters. And he went off to, I think he missed managing them for one particular match. You'll know this, Mark, probably better than me because you're more of a football guy. But he disappeared off to Barcelona, not because he was scouting for a new talent, not because he thought, let me check out whether there's a new kind of, young, I don't know, Neymar to be found or some protege that can save us from, getting slaughtered by Arsenal every time we play them. No, he went to Barcelona to make a speech in support of Palestine.
Yeah.
Right? And he said... basically this, He says that he looks at the suffering of innocent people caught up in the conflict in Gaza, and it hurts him. He says. He basically said that. Where's the quote here? We have, hang on, where he is. Yeah, never ever in the history of humanity have we had the info in front of our eyes, watching more clearly than now. And here is where people get upset. Genocide in Palestine, right? Now, nobody sensible says there's a genocide going on.
I'd call for a VAR decision on whether it's genocide
yeah,
or
I think
not.
so.
Absolutely.
I think
we need to take a second look at
Can we
that.
see whether his like left pinky was ahead of the final defender?
Can we honestly now contend with another thick football pundit that's getting involved in politics? You know, we've got Gary Lineker, Gary Neville, and now him. I mean, seriously? We could do without it, couldn't we?
I know. We really don't need it. And he said this, what happened in Ukraine? What happened in Russia? What happened all around the world? In Sudan? Everywhere? What happened in front of us? Do you want to see it? It's our problem as human beings. There is somebody who sees the images from all around the world who is not affected. Today we can see it. Before we could not see it. Today we see it and it hurts me.
So it's not really much.
As he walks around Manchester lately, because Manchester is in a pretty bad way, right? Yeah. There's a lot of crime, there's a lot of homelessness, there's a lot of poverty. You know, he would do a lot better to kind of cast his gaze upon inner city Manchester.
You would also,
Palestine, virtue signalling.
But as you were suggesting, Mike, I think it'd be better to avert his gaze towards improving Manchester City's defence rather than Palestine's defence. right. I mean, that's what he's actually paid big money
perhaps
for.
he could give some advice to Hamas on the 4-4-2 formation. You know, definitely get a false number 9 up there, you know, to lead the next attack on a kibbutz in Israel. I mean, I know we can't joke about these things, you know, but this is Plank of the Week. Rebecca, what do you make of people like Pep Guardiola involving themselves in this kind of stuff?
Well, he really typifies the theme of what's going on in the news this week, that people believe that money suddenly buys them intellect and suddenly buys them having an opinion that anybody's interested in. Russell's quite right. You know, he's in the same stable now as Gary Lineker and Gary Neville. Guys, you're overpriced. You know, you were paid to kick a football. Stay in your lane, boys. We're not interested in your opinion on anything other than football, really. I would also add that he puts himself in the same category as Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick for turning up at the wrong lobby at the vote the other night, which I thought was utterly hilarious. So he's in with them.
He is, absolutely right. What is it about Manchester and football? You get Gary Neville and Pep Guardiola mouthing off about this. But the other thing is that he's upset the local Jewish council of Greater Manchester and the region, who said that, you know, comments like this from people like him will fuel anti-Semitic acts, and that's the serious part of it. They said that he should focus on his football. He's apparently been a total failure at displaying solidarity with Manchester's Jewish community, particularly after that attack on the synagogue last October. They say this: we have repeatedly asked for prominent individuals to be mindful about the words they use, given how Jewish people have had to endure attacks across the globe. Pep Guardiola is a football manager. While his humanitarian reflections may be well-intentioned, he should focus on the football. Manchester City is being let down by him repeatedly straying into commentary on international affairs. This is the second time in a week he's decided to offer his controversial views on the Middle East conflict. And it is especially galling given his total failure to use this significant platform to display any solidarity with the Jewish community subjected to a terrorist attack a few miles from the Etihad Stadium.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a good point.
Yeah, it is a very good point. And look, you can always say you need to keep politics out of sport, and I basically agree with that. But I think you can sometimes do, if you like, relatively uncontroversial humanitarian stuff, right? I mean, you can go and visit sick kids in hospital without giving a political view on NHS funding, for example. You could definitely have shown sympathy with the Jewish community in Manchester without taking any particular position on the Middle East.
Yeah.
And it becomes a heavy, heavy distraction. And judging from the words that you were just quoting there, Mike, I mean, it's not as if he had anything particularly interesting to say either, right?
No.
He didn't have a sort of massive, brilliant solution.
But that's exactly the point, isn't it? And there's a lesson here in terms of staying in your lane, right? So these people are using a platform that they've garnered through some other discipline, in this case football or entertainment, whatever it might be, and then use that platform to voice an opinion about something they know very little. And I think that that's very, very dangerous. So look, we're all for freedom of speech and so on, but it'd be like, I don't know, Robert Jenrick deciding on match of the day to have a say in who should be picked for the England 11 against the next international match. I mean, you wouldn't expect that to happen. So I think these people should keep their opinions to themselves in terms of their kind of immediate circle and not use their platform to broadcast this as something relevant and poignant to the rest of the world.
My football club, way back in the day,
Who's your club?
Southampton. Way back in the day, had a great player called Terry Payne, played for England. He was in the 66 World Cup squad, didn't play any matches, as I recall. Played more games for Southampton than anybody else. Really good, top professional footballer, England international. He was a local Tory councillor in Southampton.
Was he?
Yeah.
Wow.
And, but, all right, you've got a particular political badge on you, but he was actually doing some kind of community service at least.
Can I just ask you something controversial? Do you believe that West Ham won the 1966 World Cup?
More or less, yeah.
Wow.
yeah.
I thought you were going to have a go at me.
More or less.
It's a popular thing in Essex, I can tell you.
Yeah.
I remember when Piers Morgan put a headline on it was the final edition of The Mirror. I think it was in France. Would it be France 98? When the French won the World Cup.
Yeah.
But they had Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira and all this.
Well,
and he just went, Arsenal won the World Cup.
Yeah.
Well, I think third of the score was West Ham. Third of the score was West Ham.
Yeah, absolutely right. Right, Russell, back to you. You're going to give us Keir Starmer.
I am yet again, I'm afraid.
This is, we might have to shut the show down after this.
Truth be told, I did beg Mike for this morning. I did beg him. I said, please let me have Keir Starmer. And it's not the first time I've nominated Keir Starmer. I do feel at a distinct advantage, I have to say, over Mark and Rebecca and you, Mike, on the basis that, I guess, that where do we start? There's, 15 reasons to nominate him in terms of the amount of U-turns that he's made since being in government for only 18 months. 12 reasons insofar as the amount of cabinet ministers that have been forced to resign in disgrace or through absolute inability. But now we have the revelations and the allegations, many of which seem to be coming true by the hour, that he was determined to put his mate Peter Mandelson in the chair as the Washington ambassador, not just inappropriately, but without even waiting for the security vetting, as it now seems to turn out. I think we heard that from a former MI6 head yesterday. So determined to do this, even though Mandelson is mired in controversy, sacked from the government or resigned twice, once for accidentally forgetting to note in his parliamentary interest a £373,000 loan from the QC Geoffrey Robinson, who was also in government at the time, and also for procuring passports inappropriately for the Hinduja brothers, who happened to be Labour donors. So, the man is a disgrace. And of course, the revelations this week that Keir Starmer's asked in Parliament, were you aware that he had continued his relationships with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
Yes.
And Keir Starmer, without any hesitation, I mean, I almost want to give him some credit for the honesty, just said, yeah, I knew. And there were gasps, not just from the Tory benches,
but mainly from
Labour.
Mainly
you can
from
actually
Labour.
hear them. Maybe we should, because what I haven't done all through this show, basically, is to say, have a look at this. So have a look at this, because this is him doing it, and those people absolutely gasping.
The Prime Minister cannot blame the process. He did know it was on Google. If the Conservative Research Department could find this information out, why couldn't number 10? On the 10th of September, when we knew this, I asked him at that dispatch box, he gave Mandelson his full confidence at that dispatch box, not once, but twice. He only sacked him after pressure from us. I am asking the Prime Minister something very specific, not about the generalities of the full extent. Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
Prime Minister.
Yes, it did. As a result, various questions were put to him. I intend to disclose to this House all of the national security, prejudice to international relations on one side. I want to make sure this House sees the full documentation, so it will see for itself the extent to which time and time again Mandelson completely misrepresented the extent of his relationship with Epstein and lied throughout the process, including in response to the due diligence.
And as we speak today, calls coming in from his own party, not only for him to go, but for him, even if he doesn't go yet, to get rid of Morgan McSweeney.
Well, and some bigwigs. I mean, Gordon Brown is cooperated with the police in terms of the fact that he says that many, many months ago he relayed his suspicions about Mandelson leaking things to Epstein and therefore the markets. And that's insider trading, if that's true. Of course, the police are now investigating Mandelson on a criminal basis for misconduct in public office. John McDonnell, former Shadow Chancellor, I think John McDonnell, has also said that his position, Starmer's position, is untenable. And we will start to see, I think, over the next 24 hours. In fact, by the time this goes out, maybe Starmer's already toast, frankly, maybe he's already gone. But if not, I think there's got to be moves from not just backbenchers, but I suspect some ministers and cabinet ministers that will move against him if he doesn't go. He's as we shoot this, he was due to be making a speech, wasn't he? Which was something to do with how we should all pull together. Rah rah rah, Britain's great. You think, how deluded are you?
Yeah, no, he put out a tweet the day after his debacle of Prime Minister's questions, talking about how we're investing in our communities. Britain has always been a fair country. It's tolerant.
But it was a rallying call, really.
It's like, what's wrong with
Back me, no matter what's going on at the moment. I mean, the man is deluded.
He is.
He's gone.
Russell, I'm going to even say you've been too kind to him, my friend. Right?
He's unlike me.
Because in that interchange in the House of Commons, and I was watching this live on television, not in the chamber. What's odd about it is you were going to give him some credit for, if you like, fessing up.
Well, being honest for a change.
But what's surprising is it takes him, that was Kemi Badenoch's third question.
Yes.
Right, now you should go in, I would have thought, with a strategy of, I'm going to fess up.
Yeah.
In which case you can say that in your opening statement. I want to inform the House of the following things, and more details will be... But it was more like watching a kind of police drama when the psychopath eventually confesses, protesting their innocence, and then suddenly say, actually, you know what, cards on the table, I'm going to admit it, or it's the third answer. And a lot of people have been comparing this to the Profumo scandal, where Profumo
I think it's worse.
it's way worse, lied to the House of Commons. And I just wonder whether that was in Starmer's mind, that he finally said on... is that the only question he's ever answered at PMQs? Yeah. Well, he actually does stand up and say, yes, I did.
Let me ask Rebecca, because Rebecca is a barrister, right? And as somebody who has to occasionally perform in a court full of people who want to be persuaded by you that your case is better than the other guys, I find it astonishing. And I know you're going to nominate Peter Mandelson later, so we'll kind of be careful not to mix up the two things. But I find it astonishing that Keir Starmer, who supposedly was a top lawyer, supposedly was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, who always claims that he prosecuted a lot of bad guys, even though he also defended a lot of bad guys as well. But, he seemed really incompetent as a speaker, as a man who was trying to make an argument. As Mark said, he answered the question only at the third time of asking. And surely if you had a strategy, you would go out and say, right, we're going to kill off every supplementary question by answering the question the first time. And then they won't have anything else to go. They won't have anywhere else to go. I mean, he doesn't seem to have any of those skills.
No, he and his government have never been able to be ahead of the narrative, so they've never been able to grasp it. One point that does come to mind, of course, is that he's got to be careful that he's not in contempt of Parliament, because if he had said, I had no idea, or kept on with this fiction that the depth and the extent of the relationship, he keeps saying that, but actually that now is a null and void argument. He knows that the documents that are going to be released, that the Security Committee are going to first see and then will be released to us, he knows that in that it is obvious that he did know about the connection post-conviction between Mandelson and Epstein. So he couldn't mislead Parliament without being in a whole other world of problem from the ethics committee. So he had to tell the truth because he knew the truth was going to come out.
Yes, I think so. Rebecca's right, isn't she? She's basically, he has to be careful that he doesn't commit contempt of Parliament.
Yeah.
He doesn't. I mean, I did say this the day before PMQs. I hope what he doesn't do is get up and say, this is a police investigation, so we can't comment on it. At least he didn't do that.
Well, but let's also clarify what he did try to do by way of the addition to the motion that obviously was an Opposition Day motion, which was to say, I'll be fully transparent, except anything that relates to security matters or matters of an international flavour, which you pointed this out in another place last night. Well, the entire.
I love, by the
appointment-
way, that you're referring to GB News as the
other
other
place.
place, like they
Well,
do,
the House of
like
Lords.
they do in the House of Commons and the House of
Well, I don't know
Lords.
if Pooch is going to shout
No,
at
I
me,
like
but-
that. No, we have no
No, I
issue
know,
with
I know,
GB
I
News.
know, I know.
It's the other place we don't talk about.
Yeah, indeed.
The other place.
Yeah, look, it's look, what a cargo. Do you remember in the run-up to the general election when Keir Starmer talked a lot about, draining the swamp, getting rid of sleaze and corruption? The grown-ups are now in charge and so on.
Oh, for
But,
God's sake, yeah.
But anyway, sorry, back to the point about the amendment, which obviously was then either withdrawn or lost, which was Starmer's attempt to try and censor
Yes.
Yeah.
the transparency of the papers
clear
that
the pitch,
related
some would
to
say.
the appointment of Peter Mandelson.
Yeah.
And of course, he lost that. And actually,
Not least because Angela Rayner put
Angela
a
Rayner's-
stiletto down and went,
well, she
"You're
put
not-
her
we're not having
stiletto.
that."
She stabbed him in the front,
Yeah.
really, with her stiletto.
It was a Rayner Badenoch double act.
First
The
time he's
sisters
ever
did
been.
for him.
Do you think that?
Is that the first time he's ever been stabbed in the front? Do you think? Sorry.
Well, there is,
Go ahead.
in a completely unrelated thing. I mean, there is a Ukrainian kind of thing going on.
That is
in the-
unrelated, yeah.
completely unrelated
Thank you.
in the background. I wonder what happens in that particular case where those
Yeah.
Ukrainian boys have been arrested for completely unrelated things.
Yeah.
Yes, where were we? Sorry.
Well, he was trying to cloak it, wasn't he?
So you think it was a conspiracy?
He was definitely.
I assumed like pure Starmer would have been you just issue a whole bunch of word salad and then you try and sort the whole thing out behind the scenes. And until he gave that answer of yes, I did, the first direct yes or no, I think he's basically ever given at PMQs. That seemed to be his strategy. He was going to flannel around. He was going to say, there's nothing to worry about here. The Cabinet Secretary is going to look at all the paperwork.
Yeah.
I mean, they will redact anything that pertains to national security or international relations. Given this was about the appointment of an ambassador, presumably all of it pertains to international
affairs,
relations.
yeah.
We would have just got loads of stuff blacked out. And the rug was pulled under his feet, partly by Kemi Badenoch was brilliantly prepared
Just,
for
I'm
this.
fascinated by this. You think that it was literally a conspired double act?
I can't be
between-
certain of that, but it just seems remarkable that all of the anti-Starmer people suddenly, at the last minute, alighted upon this idea of giving the task to the Intelligence and Security Committee,
Yeah.
which are MPs and peers with a particular expertise in this area. That wasn't what the initial Conservative motion said. Kemi only refers to it in question 4, so maybe a light bulb went on in her mind. And then Angela Rayner comes up and sort of says, actually, why don't we give it to the Intelligence Security?
Yeah, for
Maybe
full
simultaneously, maybe a good idea was suddenly all discovered all at once by all of these people.
Interesting.
But
Interesting.
anyway, whether that was by design or coincidence, that's what did for
And
it.
do you think the Tories would rather have Angela Rayner as Prime Minister than Keir Starmer?
To be honest with you, I think
mean, they're probably both as bad as each other.
genuinely think they're probably not calculating that hard. That Kemi would see her job is to just do the best she can to
to be seen to
destroy
drop
the
it.
Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And if next week or the week after it's Rayner, she'll do
Because
the
it's a
same to
feather
her.
in her cap regardless.
Correct, yeah.
Oh, well, I think technically, and I'll ask Rebecca about this in a minute. If you were, say, of a mind to force an election, if you're the leader of the Conservative Party, as Kemi Badenoch is, you want to do it sooner rather than later. Because as we've seen today, Nigel Farage has given an interview to
It might be a mistake for
Laura
Kemi Badenoch to
Kuenssberg.
do that.
Well, no, but except that Nigel has said, look, we're not ready for government yet. If they called an election tomorrow,
Yeah.
I'm not sure Reform would be able to get enough candidates together to even
I think, but
to,
believe
to,
me,
to force
we'll
it.
make do.
Well, yes,
It will.
yes, but equally, the situation is that people would look at that and go, "Oh, crikey! We might want reform in, but actually, Kemi Badenoch's not done a bad job here, and maybe there has to be some kind of pact." It would benefit the Tories to do an election sooner rather than later. Rebecca, what do you think of that?
Well, there is no constitutional requirement that there is an election, and the Tories would really struggle to force it through. The Fixed Term Parliament Act has actually been repealed, but you still need to get the votes in Parliament. Now, do remember that in the 24 general election, Reform split the right-wing vote and put in 125 backbenchers into the on the Labour side, put them into Parliament. I mean, again, sixth form activists and children actually got elected when they really stood no chance. So Reform created that situation by splitting the vote. So those people are going to cling on for dear life, and there is no way those turkeys will be voting for Christmas. So I can't see this psychodrama ending soon. But as you rightly say, if reform will win, I think the next election, or Reform and the Conservatives will have an agreement, a coalition. They're not ready, and they admit they're not ready. They know they're not ready, so they wouldn't be pushing for it, and neither would Kemi. She's only got 120 odd seats, so she's not ready. She hasn't sorted out CCHQ. She hasn't sorted out their selection processes either. So it's not as though Conservatives are ready to go back either. The problem here is when we talk about Keir Starmer being so ghastly and awful, he's ghastly and awful because of his presentation, but the alternatives are far worse. Who on earth would replace him and not destroy both our international standing and our economy? He's not done a great job, but who's going to step into his very ugly, dirty shoes? And I'm afraid the alternatives are far worse than him.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. The alternatives are far worse. But I mean, I've always said as well that I think that the way it plays out is that Starmer goes, somebody worse comes in, the economy of this country collapses, and an election is then forced because of the fact that literally everything has turned to dust.
If we have to go cap in hand to the IMF like Dennis Healey did in 1976, then that's exactly what has to happen, because then I'm sure even Labour members
then there's a no confidence in the government.
Against the government, no confidence. But either the Tories or Labour, both of them need some event, something to help boost them before May the 7th. May the 7th, the elections that are actually being allowed to be held are, regardless, going to be devastating for Labour and the Conservatives, and they both know it.
Totally.
But it's interesting what you say about, because Farage's professed theory is something's going to happen to bring about a general election in 2027.
Yeah.
He's a bit unclear about what that is.
Kind
Fair
of
enough, because it could be any one of there's a million possible black swan events.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether he's saying it in part to try and keep his reform troops sort of, mission ready. But Russell, you mentioned, the IMF came in 1976. You're quite right. By the way, they couldn't bail us out this time. The problem we've got this time is much more enormous.
Yeah.
The IMF couldn't do it. It would be more than half their available budget. But that ended in 1976. Labour limped on until 1979. There is a lot of confidence vote.
But then there wasn't a...
Eventually, but that Labour government only had a majority of 1-2 propped up by the Liberals. This government still has a majority of 160. There's a lot of ruin in a nation, you know. And
those were the days when they used to be shipping people in on stretchers and things, right? Taking them out of hospitals and going, can you come in and just wave your arm?
But, it's very difficult to see how an election's called unless the Labour Party wants it or 80 Labour MPs go rogue. That might happen. Maybe they go off and join the Greens or something. But
we've talked about the Profumo scandal and how this is a scandal as big, and as Mike rightly says, I think this potentially is bigger. But the Profumo scandal in itself didn't bring the government down. It was almost the straw that broke the camel's back, because there had been repeated issues in terms of lack of confidence, competence, the economy, and so on. That's being reflected now. So I think this has more parallels to Profumo than perhaps we might give it credit for, but without the romance, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly right. Rebecca, I'm going to come back to you because I think this would now be a good time for you to see whether you can nominate Peter Mandelson as a more willing or deserving winner of Plank of the Week. And what I should say as well is that, notwithstanding Keir Starmer's attempts to keep things from the public, the Metropolitan Police have now joined in that endeavour because they've come out and said, we don't really think that you should release some parts of the information in case it prejudices a trial. And this is the old chestnut, isn't it, that the political arm of the police in London under Sir Mark Rowley is trying to control the narrative.
Yeah, well, of course, the police, like the rest of us, think they're all incompetent, and they might release something that does prejudice a trial. But the issues on which Peter Mandelson is being investigated by the police are really a double string. Yeah. So you've got the misconduct in public office, which is the bare fact of breaching his standards of conduct and releasing sensitive information, full stop. There's the misconduct in public office. But then there's the secondary issue to that, which is, has he leaked market sensitive information. Now, Mike will know better than me about that, but looking at what the disclosures were between Mandelson and Epstein, given Epstein's job and his role in the financial markets, was Mandy releasing information that would assist Epstein in his investments, then that's a whole different picture for what has to be looked at, and that has to be looked at by specialists. This is a red herring, because what Parliament was asking was what the government knew in the face of Starmer and Morgan McSweeney and the other senior members. By the way, David Lammy was Foreign Secretary at the time, Yvette Cooper, Home Secretary. What that cabal at the top, the executive, knew about Mandelson's relationship with Epstein before they recommended him for appointment to the US ambassadorship, that is a whole different question to whether 12, 14 years ago, Mandelson committed acts that were misconduct in public office or was seen to affect the market. So I rather hope that the Met Police will find space very quickly to say, actually, we're only interested in these aspects of the evidence. The rest of it is a matter for Parliament. Actually, Parliament cannot be shackled by the police either. Parliament can decide that they do discuss things in the chamber, and it is protected. It is only a request from the Met Police, which Starmer, struggling to hold on to the narrative, grasped onto as a further reason not to disclose things. So that's what he was playing at there. So he was manipulating what the Met Police had asked him to withhold. But thank you guys for letting me have the plank of the week. Now, I'm so grateful. My first appearance, and I get to win plank of the week, because I know I'm going to be voted for on this. I know I'm going to win it. So Peter Mandelson, why do I think he's plank of the week? Well, he was made a Lord in 2008. What is the role of the Lords? The role of the Lords is to be lawmakers, and they keep a watchful eye over Parliament when they are making laws, including criminal laws. And in a democracy, which America is, very close ally, a very robust criminal justice system that is maybe not as separate from the executive and the legislature as it is in the UK, but Peter Mandelson would know that when somebody is convicted in a democratic society, in a properly held judicial system with representation, he knows that legally that person remains convicted. So it doesn't matter what the depth and extent of his relationship with Epstein was. What matters was he undermined the principle of what a conviction is by saying, I believed what Epstein said. But he never told us what Epstein said. And as I said earlier, never in the history of being a paedophile does a paedophile ever fess up to being a paedophile. So as a lawmaker, Peter Mandelson, in my opinion, has gone one step further by undermining a plea to paedophile offences. It was on the record what Jeffrey Epstein had done. It was on the record that Alan Dershowitz had represented him back in 2008, which was when Peter Mandelson was made a Lord. So in my opinion, he gets plank of the week for being a lawmaker and undermining the very, very tenet of criminal law. All the prurient stuff with him standing with, with a girl choosing off a menu of God knows what, Rent Boys or whatever, standing there in his T-shirt and his budgie smugglers, utterly disgusting, wonderful to watch the downfall of such smug, scurrilous people, absolutely glorious. But the plank of the week is because what he did in his position as a lord, as a lawmaker, what he said was, oh yeah, I don't believe the conviction either. You know, poor you, Freedom Day, well done. And, Andy and Fergie, let's all get along and believe you, Jeffrey, because clearly your plea of guilty was just irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. What victims? What victims?
Yeah, you was fitted up, mate. Rebecca's very sure that she's won Plank of the Week by nominating Peter Mandelson. I mean, I have to say, I do agree with one thing that she said, or actually two or three things that she said. One, anybody pictured on the front page of the Times and the Telegraph in budgie smugglers definitely does make you pretty plankery for the week. But also, as she says, the main reason is that he was elevated to the House of Lords in 2008, while still basically believing that Epstein was fitted up, that Jeffrey Epstein's guilty plea to a child sex charge didn't mean anything. And he was supposed to be a lawmaker. And he was supposed to be the guy that you went to for the upholding of the law.
But can I just counter? Can I counter, my lord?
You can.
Thank you. And that is that, look, there is no doubt that this man is a disgrace. But Plank of the Week, of course, is supposed to be about poking fun and a bit of parody and so on. I think Peter Mandelson and all of his antics, particularly those in recent months and years, goes way beyond the label of plank. I mean, this man is an arrogant, sinister doom goblin. And I think actually to give him Plank of the Week, if I might advance, sir, actually doesn't do the plank title any good, really, because I think this is about fun. And I think, honestly, Mandelson, if it is true that he was passing secrets to Epstein, and Epstein also was in league with the Russians, which of course is something that Ed Davey asked this week at PMQs. It goes way beyond him being a plank, and it goes to him being a criminal and a traitor.
But hang on, Russell's right on that, but I want to highlight the most important issue here,
Keir Starmer.
and that's the photograph of him in his wife fronts, right? I think we really need to break this down a bit.
Sounds like Keir Starmer.
We've really got to break down this picture of the wife fronts because, it's pretty cranky, I would have thought, to just be standing there in your wife fronts.
Who wears wife fronts?
Holding an iPad while some masseuse is speaking to him. That of itself is a little bit odd. But the bit I'm trying to get my head around is, why was there apparently no reaction when the photographer phoned up?
Right.
If I found myself in the situation of only wearing my boxers or briefs, holding an iPad, speaking to masseuse, and suddenly somebody appears at the door, click.
Right.
Oh, hang on, what the hell's going on here?
Well, also, I mean, he might have also asked a question earlier when he was invited to the apartment of Jeffrey Epstein in Paris, which apparently is known as the House of Sin.
Right.
And as I pointed out to Russell this week, apparently appears on Avenue Foch. Which is unfortunate.
There's quite a few clues there, aren't there?
There are quite a few clues. But also, apparently, Ghislaine Maxwell used to walk around taking pictures randomly of all sorts of things that went on. So I guess maybe, under the circumstances, old Mandy was used to the fact that, there were people taking candid pictures.
But it speaks to the arrogance of them all, that they didn't think any of this was going to go against them in any way in the future.
What did they think the pictures were for? This will be a lovely one to show the grandchildren. Is that what, Andrew? I'll just predatorily lure over this woman.
Did you think maybe they were planning some kind of Epstein calendar?
But what about...
maybe Mandelson was February? I don't know. Was he? Prince Andrew was June? I don't know. I mean,
he certainly was with June. What about sorry, Rebecca, go on.
Yeah, so it's interesting, what you're saying, because the rest is politics, Centrist Dad podcast, who always has an emergency to inform us on. Last night, Alistair Campbell was suggesting, in respect of that photograph, that he thought it might be CCTV in covert. And of course, Alistair's very, very close to Peter Mandelson. And it struck me that they are now reframing this narrative that all of these poor men choosing young men, and in Mandelson's case, he wanted a Cuban American, or choosing young women in the case of Andrew's case. This now provides them with the ultimate dead cat on the table. Oh, yeah, he's a Russian spy, or he's a Mossad agent. He's an asset. No. You guys were sleazy. You guys were quite happy to procure sex through Jeffrey Epstein, in addition to all the other stuff you did, the fact that he's a Russian agent has got nothing to do with it. And to watch Alistair Campbell reframe this as poor Mandy, of course he wouldn't consent to a photograph being taken. It must be a CCTV. Well, who in God's name has ever seen a CCTV at waist height, which is where that photograph's taken from? That's not CCTV footage.
No.
That is somebody recording it. And, in the case of Virginia Giuffre, of course, she probably asked for that picture of her with Andrew, which Ghislaine Maxwell has now said it's an absolutely legit photograph. Ghislaine took it as a souvenir for Virginia Giuffre. That's why. And it's absolutely right when Russell says it speaks to their complete and utter blind arrogance that they believe they're above everything.
Yeah.
So they don't mind photographs
No.
being taken.
No, exactly.
They don't
well,
mind.
Well, look at the other picture we saw this week, which was on the front pages, I think, yesterday, of Peter Mandelson getting a foot massage from what looked like a young man, right? He was luckily he was fully clothed, but nevertheless, as you know, if you're a fan of Pulp Fiction, it's not exactly like investigating the holiest of holies, but it's still a foot massage, and guys get thrown out windows because they do it to the wrong person. The other thing I should just mention on Alistair Campbell, by the way, because I'm like you, I watched his podcast last night, and I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing, because Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart were talking about Peter Mandelson as if he was a guy they'd never met, as if he was some kind of abstract figure who had been somehow brought into this web of intrigue by a guy who had a methodology of doing such a thing. And Rory Stewart gave this elaborate explanation of how people like Epstein work, because they have assets here and assets there, and they get information from them and they use them to play one against the other. And it was quite extraordinary. I mean, Alistair Campbell was at the very heart. And I said this, when I was a much younger journalist, I knew a guy called Bill Haggerty, who was the editor of the Sunday People, and he invited me to his house for a party at which Neil Kinnock, Alistair Campbell, Peter Mandelson, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were all in attendance, and they were like flies around a flame, and they could not be separated, because that was the beginning of this was the New Labour project around about probably it was before they got elected, so you're talking sort of 1996, something
what
like
an
that.
opportunity you had to go and lock them in a room and just leave them there, and you would have done the world a great service.
I know.
Well,
the funniest thing that happened at that party actually was that
could have at least taken some photos of them in their underwear.
I should have.
I mean, that was a missed opportunity.
I was there with my then wife, and I left a bit early, so maybe I missed out on all that. But one of the funniest things that did happen was Alan Price was also there, and my wife, who was American, and the Americans are not imbued with a great deal of intelligence in many ways, and he was like, "Oh, hello, I'm Alan Price," and she went, "Oh yeah, that's great." She said, "Isn't it funny you share a name with that guy from the Animals?" And he goes, "Well, I'm the guy from the Animals." Anyway, listen, we're nearly at the end of the show. So, final one to you, Mark Littlewood. The BMA.
The BMA, the British Medical Association.
Marxist scum.
I mean, it sounds grand, the British Medical Association, doesn't it? It sounds like the Royal Society for Science or something. They've always been a trade union. I'm going to agree with Wes Streeting on something. They are now acting like a cartel.
They are.
This is an extortion racket. They are demanding colossal pay rises, despite the fact that the performance of the NHS is, flatlining. In any
well, it's going like that,
yeah,
isn't it?
Exactly. Well, I mean, the interesting thing was actually all of these claims that the waiting lists are going down. Did you see what's behind this?
Not only did I see it,
I
see it, but the front page of the Times this week, which reported it, and I claim victory again, because I've been saying this for 2 years, ever since Labour have been in. It's all absolute rubbish.
Yeah, well, what they're doing is removing dead people from the lists.
No.
So we'll have no waiting lists at all as long as everybody dies before they get their necessary surgery.
Interesting strategy.
And pumping public money into almost a bribe to those hospitals to do so.
But it looks like this is massaging the figures here rather than massaging Peter Mandelson's feet. But the BMA are asking for colossal pay rises. The other thing that grates with me is you often hear, don't you, and I've always taken it at face value for people who work in the public sector, we're not in it for the money. I want to help people get, sick people get well.
It's so rewarding.
It's so rewarding. I want to teach young kids to be literate and numerate and all the rest of it. well, if you're not in it for the money, I'll take you at your word.
Yeah.
Right? The salary negotiation should be pretty straightforward here then, if you're not in it for the money. So, look, I think we've got to move towards no strike deals for people who work in the NHS. You might have a little bit of wriggle room. I mean, you might say that you can refuse overtime, for example, but you've basically got to put in your shifts. And this is a vital national service. We should be treating it in the same way that we prevent the army or the cops going on strike, because it's a risk to life and limb. Quite clearly, this is a direct risk to life and limb. So I hope the next government puts in place something approaching an absolute no strike agreement. A little bit of wriggle room at the sides, possibly, but not much.
And I think we need to clear something up as well. This kind of misnomer around the term junior doctors, it's designed almost to make the public think, oh,
they're not paid very much.
24-year-olds, probably not on that much money. You can still be a junior doctor in your 40s because you have to go through, I think it's 7 stages of
to be fair, they've
status.
renamed themselves resident doctors.
Yes.
But I keep calling them junior doctors because
they behave
I don't
like
like
kids.
them.
But some of them are earning 6 figures. I think the average is something like 60 to 70,000 pounds a year that these people are on. And let's not also forget that when the government first took office in July 2024, the Labour government gave them a pay rise. I think it was 20-something%.
I think it was 30%.
And immediately, literally within weeks, they said, well, that was easy. We'll have another 26%. And that's why they're still on strike.
You're bang on right, Russell. And the problem with dealing with the BMA, indeed, like a lot of trade unions, is acceding to their first demand is like feeding your arm to the alligator in the hope of satiating its appetite. It's just going to keep coming back
and Wes
for more.
Streeting, I think, is in a very bad place here because, of course, in 2023, when all this kicked off, he was very critical of the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, I think it was at the time, in terms of the fact that Jeremy Hunt couldn't bring this to a close.
Yeah, he said, we'll fix it.
He lampooned him. He just said, I can't believe that you've negotiated in such a ridiculous way. Well, Wes, I've got
Now
news
he's
for you.
realised you
We're
can't
now
negotiate with
2
these
years
people.
on, mate, and you're in just as bad a position as the Conservative
Well, in
government.
fact, probably worse. Rebecca, I'll come to you because I think they've spent 52 days, I think I'm right in saying, on strike since 2023. They just voted this week to continue to have the option to strike again before the summer. I always say to people, if you want to see how badly off doctors are, go to any hospital in Britain and go and watch where the doctors can park their cars, and you'll see Aston Martins, Lamborghinis, Teslas, Ferraris, Bentleys. These are not badly paid people, but yet they're holding the country to ransom, and they're killing off the NHS, aren't they?
And people.
Well, Russell and Mark, I think, have both alluded to the fact that once they got the pay rise, they said, right, we're coming back for more. Actually, that's incorrect. Before they got the pay rise, when Labour was talking about giving them the pay rise, I think it was 28% they got. They said at the time, we're not done with this. We are looking for wage restoration. But I mean, what people never like to say, I mean, I've been in the NHS and I know how everybody is treated like an angel, and it's a sainted institution. What they never like to say is that doctors are 5 years and 10 years post qualification, when they really don't take a huge amount of responsibility, they are the highest paid graduates across the board. So the BMA have always been militant. Now, there is I'm sorry, Russell, I know this is meant to be funny, but there is a serious point to make here, in which respect I do sympathise with junior doctors just a little bit, because what they are saying is, now we are not given a guaranteed job. Now, this is a new phenomenon, certainly within the last 5 years. Because what happened? Boris Johnson brought in a huge number of foreign qualified doctors. So foreign universities, foreign qualifications, brought them here, and they are now sitting in sub-consultant posts, sub-senior registrar posts as fellows, and they are blocking the system up such that a junior doctor at between 5 and 7 years qualification now cannot progress up the ranks because there is a foreign trained, foreign national doctor sitting in at the fellowship level, certainly in hospital medicine. This is happening. So kids who've been probably best in their class at their sciences and have done all sorts of things, get into medical school, they are not getting guaranteed jobs at the end of their university degrees, having taken on significant debt. So I do have some sympathy that doctors, they should be given, because their numbers are dictated by the Department of Health to the universities 10 years in advance, they should be given some job security, but they're not getting it. So we are creating a problem with those very junior doctors who, in 5 years' time, we will have a shortage yet again through doctors not being allowed to come through the system. So this is the Boris wave of immigration that has created this problem. I mean, I have spoken to you before about looking at the disciplinary websites, looking at the nursing, midwifery and the GMC for where the doctors who are being now pursued for professional discipline and professional misconduct, where they're coming from, because that is another story altogether. But I do have some sympathy over their job security issues, not over the pay, because they are more than well paid. And final point, I know it's not funny, but final point, the NHS contributes 30% to their pension pot as an employer. In no other walk of life, in private practice especially, and in the private sector, does your employer contribute 30% to your pension. This is a massive bill, and a third of our GDP goes on NHS pension payments.
I know, and the pension situation is absolutely ridiculous, totally and utterly ridiculous. We've got to move on though, because we're nearly at the end of the show, and I think we've got a couple more, 3 more maybe to get in, because you've got a special mention, I think, for Essex Council. I've got to give you quickly Lord Hermer, one of my least favourite people, human rights aficionado, friend of Keir Starmer. It turns out, once again, that I was right all along when I said that Lucy Connolly was victimised. She was absolutely highlighted as the face of far right thuggery, and despite the fact that she didn't do anything other than go out for a walk with her dog, having sent a tweet out that she needed to go to prison for 31 months. It now turns out, thanks to a story from the Telegraph and Alison Pearson today, that Lucy Connolly had her prosecution for stirring up racial hatred fast-tracked for approval by Lord Hermer, the Attorney General. She was apparently treated as an emergency charging decision case, right, under which specialist counter-terrorism prosecutors secured consent for her prosecution. And not only that, Lord Hermer's office responded within 12 hours of the request being made. And not only that, it now looks that details revealed by Crown Prosecution Service documents look as though she was actually earmarked for a prison sentence.
Yeah. So I've interviewed Lucy Connolly.
Yeah. She was on our show a couple of weeks ago.
And she's very, very candid about this in that, look, let's be clear as well, she's a mum, she's a childminder, right?
Yes.
She's not a politician, she's not a lawyer. She tweeted something that even by her own admission was, stupid, and she deleted it.
Yeah.
The account she makes, though, which is very compelling, is that as soon as she was arrested and then actually immediately almost released on bail, things changed very, very quickly when clearly what we now know is the politicians got involved in terms of making an example of her. I've called her on social media, she calls herself, many others have, a political prisoner. And the reason we say that is because she is. And what we're now hearing with regard to Hermer and his kind of crusade to try and hold her to account and make an example of her really kind of proves that. What Lucy says, and this is absolutely convincing from my point of view, the attack on Lucy by others, which is, but she's a criminal, she's a racist, and she pleaded guilty, which proves it. You have to put yourself in her position that, she gets arrested very suddenly, obviously, doesn't know it's coming. She's then put in a position by the authorities, whether it's the duty solicitor, because of course she didn't have her own lawyer, or whether it's the senior police at the time, that effectively say to her this: if you plead not guilty, you will sit on remand for up to 2 years. So you'll be in prison anyway for up to 2 years. That's if you plead not guilty. If you plead guilty, you'll probably be out in a few weeks. Yeah. That's our recommendation. That's what you should do. And that is why it was fast-tracked through so quickly, but also to make an immediate example of her. Because don't forget, at the time, Britain in various places was kind of on fire insofar as the riots, the protests that were ensuing. So she was absolutely used as a political whipping post. And I think Lord Hermer, we talk about the fact that politics and law shouldn't, although politicians make law, politicians shouldn't get involved in the upholding of the law. Hermer definitely has a case to answer here, as does Keir Starmer, another reason why she should be Plank of the Week, Plank of the Decade, frankly. They rounded on her on purpose, completely unfairly, put her in a position where she didn't know upside, up from down, just to make an example of her on the front page of the papers to deter others.
It's even worse than this again, though, isn't it, Russell? That I could sort of understand the Attorney General fast-tracking something where there was a genuine national emergency. Let's, touch wood this doesn't happen.
Like Shahid Butt or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a whole bunch of terrorists.
Or a rogue ex-cabinet minister that's leaking secrets to someone.
Let's just imagine a whole bunch of terrorist cells break out. There's arson everywhere in all of our cities. And the government's got to say, right, we've got to get a grip on this fast. Round up the first 100 arsonists you can find and let's fast-track this to prison. But to treat Lucy Connolly, whatever you think of her conduct, as if she's like top of the FBI wanted list.
I know.
That is bizarre.
But they needed a scapegoat.
Well, but that is the mixture of oil and water, isn't it? I think the job of the Attorney General shouldn't be to make those political scapegoating calculations. If there genuinely is an emergency, you've suddenly rounded up 500 people from a particular terrorist cell, there might be a case for fast-tracking their trials. But in this woman's case, she's also not public enemy number one by any stretch of the imagination.
But also to stop, what might be considered to be violent conduct or things that,
not a tweet,
changing the social order. But I mean, surely, as a lawyer, Rebecca, let me ask you this: shouldn't it be impossible for politicians to interfere with the law? They keep saying they didn't. Keir Starmer was asked specifically if he interfered with the law and ordered her to be told to plead guilty. He denied it. I never believed that for a second. I think there's no question that the law has been politicised in this country. I mean, you see an example of it every single day. Lefty judges, letting people off. Juries we saw this week, letting off the Palestine Action people, even though they could clearly see what they'd done. The law is now political, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely it is. And I think one of the points that is very important that has been missed is that why would the Attorney General be involved in a charging decision? That's a matter for the Director of Public Prosecutions, who is independent of government. The Attorney General is not independent of government. Now, they explicitly say that they're outside of the executive, but they actually have an executive function within our constitution. And I know this is boring and dry, but it really does matter, because when people talk about why didn't Keir Starmer prosecute Jimmy Savile, he's not saying, well, the Attorney General told me not to. The Attorney General should not be involved in a decision that the independent DPP should be making. And this is a really, really big point that has been missed here. Hermer has completely overstepped his remit by instructing the DPP to do what they did. Second point, I wish Lucy Connolly had asked me to represent her, because I would have said, you are going not guilty and I'm going to get you bail. This is not a remand offence, because it is not an automatic prison sentence. And she has sufficient mitigation, certainly on the personal side, to not be on remand. She had not committed violence. She had incited violence. I agree with that, but she had deleted it immediately. And she was not a risk to public safety. She could have been bailed on the basis of keep off Facebook or don't mention the riots again. I'd have got her bail. It's not a case that if you go not guilty, you're on remand for 3 years. Absolutely not. You have multiple opportunities to apply and appeal bail decisions, and then there's a custody time limit. So when you say 2 or 3 years on remand, that's wrong. And if she was given that advice, then I would honestly be looking at who gave her that advice.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's no question. She was obviously given that advice deliberately by, government instruction, and that's why she ended up where she was. Now we're running so far over here, and we're going to have to finish up with the next two very quickly. Russell, your special mention for Essex Council.
Yeah, so this is news breaking this week from the hapless Essex County Council, which is where I live. They are the overseers of everything that is kind of roads,
is it Tory
transport.
run?
It's been Tory run continually for 26 years, I'm afraid. Mark, I know that's your kind of, your political home. But here we go. I'm going to slag them off for
I'm
good reason.
amazed we got that long a stretch.
Yeah, you should get a stretch, maybe in other respects, you Conservatives. But anyway, we'll come back to that. So this is the news that Essex County Council put up a sign in Dawes Heath, which is in Benfleet, Essex, which is a duck warning sign. I kid you not, a duck, literally a triangle in red background with a duck on it, which apparently, first off, has cost £7,000. Now, how on earth does a sign, just an aluminium sign about that big, cost £7,000?
Wow.
2 van loads of contractors, 6 people turned up to put this. That's probably why it cost £7,000. But according to local residents and local councillors, there's no duck ponds or lakes anywhere near that part of Dawes Heath. So no ducks at all, never been seen crossing the road.
So you're supposed to stop for the ducks, are you?
I guess you're supposed to show caution just in case, gander, drake, whatever, it's, entourage cross the road. So no ducks anywhere in sight, never been seen. But Essex County Council didn't bother checking that. They decided to put up a sign at a cost of £7,000 to the residents, the taxpayers of Essex, despite the lack of evidence that there are any ducks anywhere near.
Even if there were loads of ducks, what's the sign supposed to do?
I don't think it's to all the ducks. I don't think the ducks would.
No, but I mean, presumably, you're driving your car, a duck crossed the road, you'd stop.
Yeah, I know, but look,
I mean, you also need a sign saying, a domestic cat might cross the road, a dog
That's
might
a boy
cross the
racer
road.
in Essex doing 70 miles an hour.
Aren't they going to stop?
Duck.
Look, I could bang on all day about the misdemeanours of Essex County Council. This is the council, of course, that sent out an email to all of their staff saying if you're offended by these Union Jacks on gantries and fences along the A12 and
Here's our
A127,
helpline.
you may well be suffering from anxiety, and we're here to help you. And that came out from the Conservative leadership. So, yes, just another hapless episode from the annals of local authorities.
The obvious headline being, of course, no ducks given. Finally,
it's quackers. Yeah.
It's quackers, yeah. Finally, and I'll give the final comment to Rebecca on this one. Have a look at this particular piece of footage. This is some lefty protesters up in Newcastle. You might have seen this earlier in the week. Nigel Farage turned up in Newcastle, went to dinner in a fairly well-known local restaurant.
With Matt Goodwin.
And what can only be described as a bunch of ridiculous and ludicrously dressed, smelly people turned up, started hammering on the windows, shouting, through the door, And at one point, the funniest part, I think, and I don't know if we'll have it on the clip, is this woman, this very large woman, dressed in a sort of purple outfit, said, "Look at how they're dressed. Look at how they're dressed," as if she was well dressed. Anyway, check it out. So lefty protesters, my final nomination, because, Rebecca, they just seem to be so ghastly, Yes, there are right-wing protests that perhaps don't go terribly well, but these people were chanting, the most horrible things. They detest Nigel Farage. They don't even know why. They detest everybody that is anywhere near him. They don't even know why. They just want to be a nuisance.
Yeah, Mike, I'm afraid you've got this completely wrong. These people are bathed in virtue, and it doesn't matter how violent or unpleasant they are or how smelly they are. Their virtue immunizes them from criticism, and their virtue it just follows them round like a halo. So it's a bit like Trump derangement syndrome. Any criticism of Trump is valid. Any criticism of Farage is valid. How anybody manages to criticize Matt Goodwin, who I'm a big fan of his, by the way, I think he's a brilliant choice for that seat. But they're bathed in virtue because they're the Be Kind Brigade, so you can't say anything about them. So I'm not going to.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So now it comes down to the wire. And the big question is, the only two people who could be possibly in a sort of a fight to the finish here, Keir Starmer, Peter Mandelson, which one is it? Who is going to be the plank of the week? As we speak, Starmer has apparently been making a speech at East Sussex in which he says, "I'm sorry for believing Peter Mandelson's lies."
Well, yeah, as if that's going to get him off the hook, isn't it?
Like he didn't realise he had full.
Yeah, it's pathetic, it's feeble. I mean, I would say that there's going to be plenty more chances to nominate Keir Starmer He's in danger of becoming the Glasgow Celtic of Plank of the Week, isn't it? Just wins it 28 times in a row.
Although not this year, though.
No, okay.
Heart of Midlothian, I think you'll find it.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe, but this might be Mandelson's last chance. I also think for Mandelson, Andrew may have done us a favour here with his royal title strips and all of that sort of thing. I think we need more public shaming in Britain. And I think anyone who's publicly shamed, not just Andrew, should have to change their surname to Mountbatten Windsor. So in future, rather than being Lord Mandelson of Foy, I think he should become Peter Mountbatten Windsor.
I wondered,
and we
actually,
should do this to a range of other people as well.
This week, now that Andrew's had to be forced out of Windsor, he has to drop Windsor from his name. He
just
doesn't live
Mountbatten.
there anymore.
Yeah.
So he now has to rename himself Andrew Mountbatten Sandringham.
Yeah,
Or something. I don't know. You kind of have to be the arbiter here, because I can't rely on Rebecca to be in any way neutral, because she wants Mandelson to win.
I'm
Russell
biased.
obviously wants Starmer to win.
I
see you leaning towards
I'm
Mandelson,
leaning
the
towards
Dark
Mandelson.
Lord.
I'm leaning towards the Dark Lord, the Prince of Darkness. And it's part because although there's a ton of shocking behaviour here, let's be honest, there is an absolute ton of planky behaviour as well. And he's still saying, as I understand it, insofar as any statements are being issued, I've done no wrongdoing, I've no criminal.
Look, can I then just concede in defeat, if I may, then? That
You've given up already?
Well, he's plank of the week. Yeah, well, look, he's,
we're building a coalition here.
But can I just say that he is also a whole lot more than just a plank of the week?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I mean, we have once nominated the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Let's not forget.
You still look it over your shoulder.
Yeah. All right. So listen, I'm afraid Rebecca Butler makes her first appearance on Plank of the Week,
And
wins
wins.
it,
Wins it, well
hands down with the Peter Mandelson. And I say Peter because he's no longer going to be Lord Mandelson. So very well done to you, Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining us.
That image of the budgie smugglers will burn holes in your retinas for the rest of your days.
Yes, it's a shocking thought. Peter Mandelson in his budgie smugglers.
Yeah.
I mean, for that alone.
Yeah, you've got to win it for that alone.
Plank of the Week, I think, Peter Mandelson, well done, sir. And may you never darken our door again. And please don't make another comeback, for God's sake. Thank you to Rebecca. Thank you to Russell. Thank you to Mark. Thank you to all of you guys for watching. We'll be back with the same again this time next week.